Thank you, everybody. It's wonderful to be here, and I can't thank Nadal, Carolina, Ryan, the team here for putting this together. I'm very honored to be here. I love this theme, growth. It's something that I've had a lot of luck with, and it's completely unintentional, to be honest with you. I think if you brought any of the old timers from Shake Shack up here, we would all say this is somewhat accidental. We never planned to even open a second location, let alone, I think at last count, Shake Shack's at about 550 around the world, 300 in the US and about 200 in various countries, maybe about 18 countries. And when I joined this company, I was with Shake Shack for 16 years. I left at the end of last year. I was working at the founder of the company, Danny Meyer's, one of his other restaurants, Gramercy Tavern in New York. And I've always been a big fan of the original chef, Tom Colicchio. I joined there, I wanted to work with him. He's very much a pioneer of seasonal cooking in New York City, a big green market person. And while I went there because of Tom and his food, it was actually Danny Meyer and the culture that I've always known about, hospitality, putting like the team members first, that really inspired me. So when it came time to move on, I did 3 years at Gramercy, a year and a half with Tom, and then I helped transition the current chef, Mike Anthony, which is another wonderful, very much green market driven chef. I wanted to learn more. I was in the kitchen and I said, well, what about pouring wine? What about like clearing a plate? There's a ballet, there's a beauty to that skill set. I want to learn it. I don't want to just understand the back. I want to understand the entire business, because maybe one day I'll open my own restaurant. So at the time, the only other restaurant in Danny Meyer's group, which was all fine dining restaurants, from his Indian restaurant Tabla to 11 Madison Park, was Shake Shack. And they offered me a management job there. I'm like, I can't do this. I was cooking morel mushrooms. I was cooking turbot. I'm going to cook a hamburger? I'm never going to work in this business again. It was very scary, to say the least. But I said, let me do a trail. Let me go in there and just see what it's all about. And what I discovered in this tiny little shack in New York City, it's about 400 square feet, was the culture of his company. The hospitality was very much alive, and also the quality of the ingredients. All the same vendors that Gramercy Tavern used, and that connection to the green market, which was about 5 blocks south, was very much alive in there. It was just a lot more simplistic. The dining room was a park, and that's where it all started for me. But even before that, just to give you a little bit more about myself here, we're going to talk a lot about culinary, marketing, and operations. I think these were the pinnacles of our growth. And one of the biggest things we learned while doing this is the importance of being intentional. Being intentional with all of these if you want to grow. Because as I said, this was not intentional in the beginning, but just being people that really care about the feel of the restaurant, the experience, and the food. We did put a lot of thought into that initial menu, but we never thought it was ever going to grow. And then we actually had to backtrack and realize even something as simple as like the type of salt, the size of the salt we were using was actually mission critical to our fries and to how our burgers are seasoned. And we said to ourselves, if we're going to grow and we're going to go international, can we get this salt? Because all of our standards, all of our recipes are based on that. Something as simple as salt, we never realized how important it was. And if we went back, we might be thinking a little bit more about saying, okay, is this a brand that's ready to grow with us? But again, questions we never thought about. So this is where I actually grew up here. This is actually a clam shack. I grew up in a town, Mystic, in Connecticut, northeast, really cool seaside area. That whole corridor going from Connecticut to Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and up into Maine, it's littered with these little shacks. Not too different from what Shake Shack became in the early days. And while Shake Shack took a lot of inspiration from the Midwest, where the founder of the company, Danny Meyer's from, this is where I grew up, and it's a very similar vibe, as you're going to see here. The difference is this is all about lobster rolls. It's all about fried clams. But the idea of bringing people together in the neighborhood in a restaurant, this is something I grew up at experiencing. And here's another shack just to kind of give you an idea of what this area looked like. This place does great lobster rolls. This is a little town called Noank. And while I never really grew up around burger shacks, I got the vibe of what this was about here. And I don't know if anyone knows what this is. Does anyone know what this is? This little place? This is Shake Shack. This is actually Shake Shack in 2001. And the whole reason this opened was because Danny Meyer opened 2 restaurants. This is a park. This is Madison Park here. Danny Meyer opened 2 restaurants across the street. One was 11 Madison Park. The other is a restaurant that's now closed by name of Tabla. And Danny's restaurants, if you've ever been to 11 Madison Park or Tabla back in the day, had these big, beautiful windows overlooking this park. This park in 2001 was one of the worst parks in New York City. Everyone did not want to walk into the park. They wanted to walk around it for their safety. And Danny felt sad. He's like, well, I have these wonderful restaurants, great hospitality, great food. What about this park? So Danny joined a conservancy fund to help revitalize Madison Park. And the idea was, let's give people an excuse to rediscover this. Let's do food. Let's have art installations. And if you've been to Madison Park recently, it's probably the best art installations in all of New York City right now. It's a gorgeous park. But the vision was, what if we do a hot dog cart? Like, what's Danny Meyer's version of a hot dog cart? So ubiquitous in New York City. Danny's whole philosophy is, let's give people what they expect, but let's do one better. So the idea was, he grew up in St. Louis, not too far from Chicago. Chicago's a great hot dog scene. It's different than New York. He wanted to do Chicago-style hot dogs. And there it is. So the idea here was, we do the great New York hot dogs, the one that have the sauerkraut and the tomato simmered onions. Let's do that. That's New York. But let's give them a little something extra. And the actual original commissary for Shake Shack was 11 Madison Park. They have a private dining room. That was Shake Shack's kitchen. We were literally born out of 11 Madison Park. And the idea here is, there's all these fresh ingredients. Actually, this relish right here came from a person in the green market in New York City by the name of Rick Field. He has a great company called Rick's Picks. And he's a really fun guy. He's a very cerebral when it comes to pickles. His idea of pickles are very next level. And we're like, you're cool, man. You're all about the green market. You do wild stuff. We want to work with you. So we're like, the normal relish on a Chicago-style hot dog, if you've ever had it, is this neon green relish. It's kind of fun, but you don't know what's in it. We wanted to do something a little different. We wanted to make this our own. So this is how it started off. And this is Madison Park, if you've never been there. The restaurants that Danny opened were in this building right here. This is 11 Madison Park. This was Tabla. And Shake Shack is actually that little hot dog cart somewhere in there. We did that for 3 years. And it generated a lot of money for the park. There were more art installations. People were rediscovering this park. And the park came to us and said, we got something great here, guys. We're thinking about building a kiosk. Would you consider maybe applying to run the kiosk? And we said, that's a wonderful idea. So we won the bid to run the kiosk, and they built it right over here. And we said, okay, we actually have a restaurant. All the prep was happening at 11 Madison Park. We were boiling hot dogs, bringing them over there. We're like, we have a restaurant now, so what are we gonna do? Okay, we got hot dogs. Those are what people love. We're gonna do those. Danny thought back to his childhood in St. Louis. He goes, well, I grew up eating smash hamburgers. I ate frozen custard. Frozen custard's pretty much a freshly made ice cream. Not too many Americans even know what this is, but Danny grew up, he loved it. It was his ode to his childhood and his ode to summertime. So we started to go to work and put a menu together here. This is the Shack Burger. Again, we never thought this was gonna grow, but we wanted to make a very delicious, humble-looking burger. All the work went into this blend here. We reached out to a butcher in New York City by the name of Pat LaFreda, who at the time was starting to play around with the idea of grinding different cuts of meat. Again, we wanted this to look simple. We didn't want the guests to know all the work that we were gonna put into this, but the meat was the best part of the burger. We wanted to make a quote-unquote fast food burger the best it could be. So we took a few different cuts of meat that had different flavor profiles, textures, fat content, and worked endlessly to get the right blend for this burger. We knew we were gonna grill this like smash style from St. Louis, so we worked on the texture, the fat content to be the best it could be for that type of cooking. And then we said, okay, let's play around some other elements here. We tried a lot of buns. We wound up going with this potato bun, which is another part of the burger people love. It's just soft, it's easy. The great part is when you bite into this, the first textural component you get is the beef. Again, a lot of thought went into something that simple, but again, we wanted the guests to just see a burger. We also added a vegetarian option here. And there might be a few more food porn-ish photos here. Sorry about that in advance, but we'll try to limit them. So this is the mushroom burger, and this idea, again, is give people something really delicious, but also exceed expectations. We had hot dogs, we added burgers, and we were like, well, what if you're a vegetarian? Yeah, you can get a French fry, but that's not fun. Your friends are eating a sandwich. What can we do? 20 years ago, there was Boca Burgers, there was other stuff. We were kind of far off from doing the plant-based stuff, and we're like, well, what if we roast a mushroom, punch out a circle, cut it in half, stuff it with a blended cheese, roll in panko, and fry it. This is actually gonna be something that's gonna blow people's minds if you're a vegetarian. It actually became so popular that the meat eaters found out about this, and they're like, can I get that mushroom on top of a hamburger? We're like, that's a cool idea. Yeah, we could do that. It actually became a menu item called the Shack Stack. But again, we are just doing this to raise money. This is only a seasonal restaurant, by the way, at this point. It would open in the spring and shut in the fall. And if we knew we were gonna grow this place, we would have never done this. this is insanity. This is the hardest thing on the menu to actually find someone to make for us around the world, because they're like, you just don't do this. This is a lot of work. But again, we wanted to make something really fun and delicious that brings the community together. We also added crinkle cut fries. People ask, why the crinkles? Well, if you grew up in America, there's something nostalgic about those. Again, Danny's thinking about his childhood. He's thinking about feel-good stuff. And cheese sauce is delicious, but we wanted to make our own. We didn't want to buy stuff from a can. So recipe for that too. Where these fries are coming from, these are Yukon Golds. These aren't just a regular russet potato. Turns out these are a little hard to find everywhere. Again, we would have never done this if we thought we were going to grow. Last thing we added was the frozen custard. And then this is something very unique for us, beer and wine. It's just a part of the brand. If you went to one of our fine dining restaurants, meat can pair great with a glass of wine. It can pair great with the beer. Sure, a milkshake and Coca-Cola is delicious. Lemonade, we have that, but we're trying to do something a little extra and make this a little bit more unique for us. So we added beer and wine, but we then took it yet a step further and said, why don't we reach out to Brooklyn Brewery and create a beer with them? And we actually challenged the brewmaster. We were like, we don't want you to create a beer that pairs broadly with our food. We want you to actually eat the Shack Burger and make a beer that will reflect it. So he took the challenge. He actually added a German hop to it that has a very bread-like quality because he liked the bread. And we're also in a park. And he's smelling nature. He's smelling the wind. He's like, no one is going to smell my beer. And I'm a salesman. I want people to get excited about my brand. So we actually dry hopped at the very end to really bring up the aromatics. Very thoughtful, and that's why we wanted to work with them. And we thought this was gonna be fun. You know, for the few people that come in, it's gonna be unique. We didn't think we were gonna sell burgers. We thought we were gonna sell hot dogs. And when it finally opened, that's Shake Shack. That's the original one that opened in 2004, 3 years after the hot dog cart. And again, we thought we would be open from, say, 11 to maybe 2 o'clock every day and then shut the place down, serve hot dogs, not really do burgers. There was something about the simple burger that tasted more than simple that really caught on with New Yorkers. And it became a whole thing. This became a place that was synonymous with lines in the summertime. And the other thing that was very magical about this experience here, there weren't a lot of parks in New York City then where you could actually drink. So the idea of coming there, gang a burger, gang a beer, and sitting under the stars in New York City, it created this excitement. But the thing is, we never thought this could work outside of this. So this lived for about 5 years as Shake Shack, as we know it today. And we talked maybe, what if we open a second one here? Like, what would that look like? And it's like, well, how many parks are we gonna go to? Well, what if we bring that indoors? Can this go indoors? Danny did not think so. Danny was convinced it's this. It's the park, it's not the food. So for years, he didn't wanna do it. But this was not built to do volume. So every single day in those first couple of years, they ripped the kitchen down every day. Okay, what if we move the griddle over here, and what if we put the spatulas here? And instead of just calling out names, because everyone's ordering and waiting in line and just waiting in a sea of people for their name to be called, well, what if we get buzzers? Is that gonna alleviate some of this bottleneck? And then what about, do we have enough trash cans out here? What's the guest experience like? So there was a lot of this going on those early days, define and refine. We had to keep asking ourselves every day, what is this place? What exactly are we doing? Who are our guests? And are we doing it as well as we can? We thought we were selling hot dogs. We had a big station set for hot dogs. Now we're serving burgers. I guess we're a burger place more than hot dogs. Okay, are we doing that as well as we can? What else can we do to make ourselves more efficient, better? And the other thing is, we're born off fine dining. So everything we were doing in those early days wasn't about, can we make it fast? If we can make it fast but keep the quality as good, if not better, that's what the driver was on that discussions. Because again, this is gonna be a great experience. It's tapping into something primal in people. The idea of sitting down with something hot between a bun and having this experience with your friends, that's where we put a lot of the emphasis on. So the CEO of Shake Shack, Randy, who was a longtime person at the company, he worked operations for the fine dining restaurants. He lived on the Upper West Side of New York City, and he walked by this space for many years that was vacant. And he said to Danny, I got an idea. We open a second one. And Danny's like, nope, it's the park, can't do it. He's like, I don't know, I think it's something more than the park. He's like, okay, we're gonna do it. And when this fails, I'm gonna say, I told you so. And he's like, okay, done. So we signed the lease, and we opened this in 2008, and this presented a lot of challenges here because we had a tiny cramped kitchen in Madison Park. Now we actually have a very big building. This is about 3,000 square feet here. So we overbuilt the kitchen. We're like, let's add more griddles. Where else were we having problems? Milkshakes were taking forever. Okay, let's add more milkshake spinners. I don't know if you guys have had multiple restaurants over the years, but like, we overbuilt. We were answering questions that we thought were actually something valid. We put way too much stuff in there. We wound up building a kitchen that was way too big that we needed a bigger team to operate it, because to walk over from where the milkshakes were made to give it to the guest was like 20 steps. This is a waste of time, but we're learning. And we kept saying, we see there's an issue here. We also said to ourselves, if we're gonna open a second one, we have to figure out what we're doing, because to us, it was all intuitive. Like, I know how to season a hamburger. I know why place it on the grill in a certain way and how I would smash it. And I'm like, well, doesn't everybody get this? You've seasoned both sides of the meat, right? And people are like, you do? I never cooked before. I don't know what I'm doing. You guys hired me. You gotta tell me. And we're like, okay, this is an opportunity here. We need to be better about this. So before we opened this, we actually put a lot of time into building out training materials. And this was the guinea pig. Again, everything that was an issue at Madison Park, we were building it into this as the answer. But this was still a guinea pig too. We were like, is this stuff actually gonna do it? And once we actually opened, we realized, okay, training materials are good. Everyone's on the same page. We're trying to tell people what to do, like a way of easy learning, but they're not perfect. Okay, we can work with that. We can work with that. And this was pretty much all we had going on. This is the inside of it too. The other challenge was, how do we take the park and bring that inside? So we used a lot of reclaimed wood. We actually dropped the shack in the center of the restaurant, and this really became the blueprint for all the Shake Shacks that have come ever since. We wanted to make something that took the inspiration from the park and brought it indoors. The other thing we were doing at this time was saying to ourselves, we're not opening a chain. We're opening another restaurant. We're opening another Danny Meyer restaurant, and they all have their own soul. They're all named after their neighborhoods: Union Square Cafe, Len Madison Park, Gramercy Tavern. This is Shake Shack Upper West Side. This is not store number 2 or unit number 2. This is Upper West Side. Across the street here is the park, and there's also the Museum of Natural History. And because the first location was raising money for charity, can we do something there? So we reached out to the museum, and we had a great conversation, and we decided we were gonna create a menu item where the percentage of the sales were gonna go back to the museum and do something for the neighborhood. We also found some great bakers, some great chocolatiers in this neighborhood, and we created menu items that were gonna feature them. Again, this is 2 restaurants, okay? This is not too big of a deal. These are easy to manage. We never thought we would be doing this when we got to 500 locations, but this, at the time, was the moment of defining who we are. We're about each neighborhood, and again, we don't look at Miami, we opened here as Shake Shack Miami. That was Shake Shack Miami Beach on 1111 Lincoln Road. The signage, the design, all that we want to fit into that building. And then if you go to the one in Brickell, different feel, different vibe. It's very hard to grow this way, but this is how we think it's best to do it. And for us, it's worked very well. And little things like this, when it comes to the marketing aspect of Shake Shack, have been very exciting for people. Now when people find out there's a Shake Shack coming, they want to know, how's it gonna look? How's it gonna taste? Like, what are they gonna do that feels different for our neighborhood? The vision is, if we do this right, it feels like a local person open a restaurant and not a big chain just drops something down that looks like out of place. And for every single location around the world, we've done this. Again, is this the best way of doing a business? We don't know, but for us, we realized that is our brand, to be very connected to the neighborhood and try to go a little more slow and thoughtfully. So pieces of the puzzle are coming together here. And then we had a bit of a challenge coming our way here. We needed to really examine what was happening. So for us, that was saying, what's working for us? I'm sure when you design a menu item, you say to yourself, this is gonna be it. This is like the beef dish. This is gonna get people excited. Or this is the vegetable dish. It's seasonal. We're gonna sell a lot of this. And then when guests finally come in and interact with you, it maybe doesn't actually play out the way you thought. And that moment, it's like, is this working for the guest? I remember we've created a couple menu items that were so labor intensive, but no one actually bought them. And every day we come in and prep them, and we were excited about them, but they never actually worked. And as much as we had emotional connection, we loved the dish, we ultimately had to say to ourselves, this is not working. So we're in service of our community and our people. So what can we do differently here? And that's the same thing here. Like, we saw ourselves as a place that served hot dogs. New York City said, no, you're not. You're a place that serves hamburgers and milkshakes. And we're like, oh, okay, so maybe we should lean into that. Maybe instead of spending time creating a seasonal hot dog, maybe we should create a special burger. That's really gonna resonate. And every time we open a new location, we're always asking these questions because, again, we don't know how people are gonna interact with us. We kinda know, but it's interesting because, say, people in Miami interact with the brand differently than they do in Los Angeles. different burger cultures, different expectations, and then there are other places that have come before us. And you go up with In-N-Out, people are saying, do you guys do protein style burgers? Can you put lettuce together instead of a bun? We have had that request a few times, but of course, opening in LA, it's what people know. We have a lot of less ready to go because there's a lot of protein style that happens at Shake Shack there. The other thing is it's a dialogue. Again, it's not just myself trying to create a menu item as the culinary director. It's, can our supply chain team get this? Can our training team train this burger? Am I just doing this for my ego, or am I trying to create something that's going to set the team up for success? And it's also, again, it's a dialogue with your guests. Again, we think we're going to be used in a certain way and provide a certain need for our community, but is that really happening? We have to examine it. We've actually stumbled a few times on this. It comes down to knowing your North Star. And for us, this is what Shake Shack's North Star was. We're born out of a group founded by Danny Meyer. It's all about hospitality. And I put that at the very top because when people say, what makes you guys different? And there's great burgers everywhere in this world now, which is pretty impressive. There's so many great burgers, and people say in this crowded field, what makes you guys different? We leaned into what we always felt was right intuitively, and then we actually had to put dialogue behind that to express that to people. Fine dining heritage. We're born out of 11 Madison Park. If any of you have been there, imagine that dining room, imagine that level of service, and then there's a guy walking out in what looks like a little rolling trolley with a tablecloth over it, and then a tray of bloody meat falls out that was meant to go to Madison Park for burgers. Daniel Hume wasn't happy about that. He was like, I think you guys should find another commissary. I don't know if this is working out here. I got blood on the floor and I'm serving this food and it's not a good thing. So we're like, yes, chef, yes, we get it. We're going to move on. But that's literally who we are. And that's something anytime we would think of a touch point in hospitality or actually the food, that's what we lead with. And there could be trends that pop up. There could be something that's super simple. Cheetos dusted. Do we Cheeto dust a burger? Maybe we can, and maybe we shouldn't. Or maybe there's actually a happy medium where we can take ways of bringing in a little more fine dining to that way of doing it, and then finding a happy medium. And we've done every single iteration of that you can imagine. Quality of ingredients. Back in the day, we were using all natural meat, ground fresh every day with Pat LaFreda. Big part of the brand. So as we grow across the world, we need to make sure we can keep that going. It's a part of the brand to the point where all of the other places we source beef from in the world, we get it from Aberdeen, Scotland, we get it from Australia. Our supply chain team has been to all those locations because, again, for us, this is such a part of the brand that we have a massive supply chain team. And it's actually an international team too, because all these vendors we want to go to and make sure how the cattle's raised, how's it being ground? Is it actually going to be the same experience as what people expect from that very first location of park in New York City? And this is the other thing. We own that. We're a brand from New York City. If people ask us what makes you guys different, like, that right there. And it's fun because when we've gone to different countries, people are like, so where are you from? I'm like, New York. I live in Brooklyn. And they're like, cool. Biggie Smalls, right? I'm like, yeah, totally. And they're like, all right, I realize this is a brand. Miami's a brand. Chicago's a brand. This means something to people all over the world that they maybe never been to your city, but there's excitement and there is some expectation. That's a good thing. Again, it's in a way, it's representing where you're from. And again, we're super proud to be from New York. And there's ways of doing that, but also at the same time going to a new city and also embracing a lot of what makes that city special too. So we had 2 locations, and then the Mets came to us. And they were like, we're redoing our stadium. We're going to bring something new here. Could you guys do a Shake Shack? And we're like, oh God, that's a massive change here. We have to change up how we operate to get there. So at this point, we realized having a commissary for 2 locations was breaking us. That mushroom burger, literally there was a team working day in and day out to make that. And something had to give. So this was a moment that was very scary for me personally. We had to find a co-packer. Co-packer, they said they could take our recipes and make them for us. And we actually found a guy crazy enough that was willing to do all the specialty items. Because in the early days, we made the fudge sauce, the cheese sauce, the custard, pretty much everything that could be made, we were making that in-house. So this guy said, I can do that. This is my business, but I can also make that insane mushroom burger that I don't know why you guys ever invented. He goes, it's going to be a lot of work, but we'll figure it out. So that was a learning lesson for us, because to take a recipe that we love so much, of course, especially if you're a chef, you hold that close to your heart. No one can make your recipe as good as you, especially a factory. No way. We went in there and saw they used the same equipment we were using, a big burr mixer, but theirs was 30 feet tall and a massive vat. And they can weigh the ingredients out to a point where they're even more consistent than we'll ever be doing it in all the different locations. These guys actually tightened our game up. Unexpected, but these days I realized we would not have been able to grow if the Shack sauce was not being made by one person all around this country and sometimes international. So if you're in Miami, if you go to Chicago, if you go to St. Louis, that's one thing that makes us a little more consistent. But it's the same exact recipe. It's actually a mayonnaise made from scratch. Eggs, oil, we're blending together. It's not a mayonnaise. That was important to us. We found people that could do, and there are a lot of them out there, and they're actually very talented at what they do. And then we had another person knock on the door and said, hey, we're doing something down in Miami. Now, this is kind of fun because the person who built this, he goes, hey, Danny, I went to 11 Madison Park. I love it. Can I get one in this building? Danny's like, I'm sorry, there's only 111 Madison Park, but we just opened a second Shake Shack. How about that? He's like, Shack? Yeah, sure, I'll take it, whatever. This was an unbelievable opportunity for us. We've never, in the history of the company, opened a restaurant outside New York. We had to try to figure out how we were going to do this. Again, who are we as a brand? How are we going to enter this city? And also, how are we going to get the food down there? Everything's coming from New York City. This is a moment where we had to break down all the systems we had in place that were keeping us going at 3 restaurants and now start to go out of state. And a lot of challenges came up with this here, but for us, it was a matter of saying, we're going to make the investment. So I was living here for about a month when this location opened up, and it was actually an incredible experience. I love the city so much. And a lot of the team members that came to open this too, the general manager, the managers, they were all people that were the same position in New York City, and they loved the opportunity of growing with us. These are very talented people, and actually one of them became our chief operating officer. But again, we knew he was talented. If we weren't growing, giving him an opportunity to grow, he was probably going to leave us. And this year around the same time was also a very big moment for us. This is our Smoke Shack burger. We never had a bacon burger on the menu, and all of our guests, number one request, again, listening, it's a dialogue. We're like, well, what about bacon? We're like, yeah, bacon's cool. We love it too. But we just didn't want to put on the menu and say, you can add that to the Shack burger. Again, we're thinking, can we make this a little more unique? So we're like, okay, bacon is good. We love it smoky and rich. We get a cheeseburger, Shack sauce, mayonnaise-based buttered bun. This is going to get very heavy. What can help cut the richness here? I grew up in an Italian-American family, and as my parents would often cook a pork chop, and as it was resting, they would throw cherry peppers in the pan, swirl them around, put that on top of the pork chop. It cut the richness. And that's what I thought back to. And we actually, our pickle maker had cherry peppers. He actually dropped off a case to me. So I'm like, okay, let's give it a shot. We put this together, and I had our CEO come taste it, and he was like, this is awesome. I'm like, you don't see this as an Italian burger? He goes, no, it's a burger with pickled peppers. What are you talking about? I'm like, again, I see it one way. How does everyone else see it? Again, it's a lot of up here, but what reality is very different when crafting a brand like this. So this went on the menu. It was the first burger since the opening of 2004, but we also had a moment here. We're thinking back to like, the meat's all natural. We actually were using a different bacon than we use today. We're using Niman Ranch, but in the very beginning, it was a different great bacon that was super smoky. But right before we launched this, we had signs ready to go. The teams were trained. We actually paused the opening. We said, well, wait a minute. We're getting a little bit bigger now. We actually are making a little bit of money that we can actually choose the vendor we're using. Do we want to just use like something commodity? Is that our brand? That can be good too. Or do we want to take the time and support someone like a Niman Ranch that's doing it a little bit different? Like, where do we stand as a brand? So even something like this that was delicious, this is a big moment for us. And this is, again, like 14 years ago where we had to say, what is the brand? Who are we? How do we want to be remembered? And we said, well, the Providence ingredients, that is us. That is where we want to put our time and effort. And then this is Shake Shack number 7 here. This is Dubai. These guys came knocking to us. The owner of this company here said, we checked you guys out. I went to one location, and the CEO went to another. We met in the middle of New York City. We tried the burgers. We really like it. We want to bring you guys. And we're like, you sure you're not looking for Five Guys or In-N-Out? You sure you'll shake? We got 2 of these places? And we did not want to do this, to be honest. But they flew us out there. We checked it out. And what we realized, or our partners here operate Starbucks. And they do it better than Starbucks operates itself in America. And we're like, this is an opportunity here. We don't know what the hell we're doing, but we're going to go to school. We're going to get our asses kicked in the process too, because we are not sophisticated to do this. And we said, let's learn. Let's try something different here. This is a great opportunity here. This feels right. Let's give it a shot. And then we signed the deal and they said, okay, this is great, guys. So if you can give us your operations manual, we'll dig in and we'll see if you have any questions and we'll get started. And we said, what the hell is an operations manual? We don't know what the heck this stuff is. So literally we went radio silent for a week and we all hunkered down in the office and we created that. And we were like literally Google and all that stuff. AI was not really available at that time. So we were calling anyone we knew that knew anything about an operations manual. And we started to put it together. But again, small details that we really wish we paid attention to in the beginning. It would save a lot of backtracking because again, we weren't going to grow. We started to grow. We started to recognize that. And again, like, is that salt available? Is the cheese on our burger available? Can we import it? Can we get a local? What are like the tariffs? Stuff we never thought we would ever have to answer. If we thought about this going back, we maybe would make a few changes here. But the most important thing that we've ever said was we would not change a thing. What we had to do was make the food great. We had to make the experience great. And I know a lot of people have talked about that in the past. And actually, yesterday was some wonderful conversations about making it great, especially Chef Misha here yesterday. 2 years on working on a sauce. It's not too dissimilar. There's so much that can go into this here. But again, we want to spend the time to realize what makes us special. The oil in a recipe, not special. The specific type of cheese for our cheese sauce is special. There's a way that they bond together that other cheeses don't. We didn't know that. We didn't know what we were doing. We learned a lot of this the hard way. This is another photo of what that shack looks like again. Shack is right there. Reclaimed wood in there. Again, we're trying to bring the elements of Shake Shack. And this is a bold step for us. We were not planning to do this, but this is where it had to go. Then we opened one in Kuwait. Again, taking more elements of it and growing. This is another one here in Dubai. Again, you can see the architecture is trying to blend into these neighborhoods. This one's actually right on the beach. And then we got a review from the New York Times. And I actually was really excited because we got 1 star. He tore us apart, but we got 1 star. I'm like, this is cool, right? He was saying to us, okay, here's the thing. You guys do a lot of fresh stuff, but your fries suck. He goes, why are you making fresh fries? So we did. I don't know if any of you ever tried this here, but at this point, in 2013, we started to roll out new fries. And what we did, again, we're listening to one person. We never asked our guests, what do you guys want? They were all saying, we like the crinkle cuts, guys. Who cares if they're frozen? That's actually something that's good in the world of French fries. These are just like everyone else. We never knew that. Again, we spent so much money retrofitting all of our locations to do this that at the end of the day, once we went back to the crinkle cuts, which was a year later, we just Instagrammed it. We had a photo of the crinkle cuts. We go back every location, November 5th. It was the most liked Instagram post that entire year. So again, the fans spoke pretty loudly. But at the same time, we were opening in London. And I spent a lot of time going to different restaurants. Heston Blumenthal, incredible chef, probably the best fries I've ever had. And these guys told me, in the summertime, where you're kind of in that gap part where like potatoes are getting old, the sugars are kind of getting sparked, they don't serve the triple cooked chips. They serve mashed potatoes. And I'm like, well, if this guy can't figure it out, he has a scientific background, the culinary excellence background, why are we trying to decode this mystery? It can't do it. So all of this happened around this time. This is, again, a very unintentional moment. But what's happening is we were starting to grow. We had an international partner. We were starting to open in other cities here. And we had investors. But it was not easy to get the money to grow that we wanted to grow. So this was a long conversation. And we said, maybe it's time to consider this. The businesses were doing good. And again, if anything, we were leaning into who we were more than everything. And that's what attracted the investors in those days. If they came and asked us, well, why the Shack sauce? Or why do you guys still have these Chicago dogs when people are mostly buying the burgers? We had answers. We had passionate answers because, again, we thought about everything repeatedly. We were refining our approach so everything had a rhyme to a reason. And that was something that really attracted people. When they asked the question, we had an immediate answer, and it was something with a deep amount of intention behind it. Then we added this to the menu. The reason why? We had all these fryers. We got rid of fresh cut fries. We're like, this is an opportunity here. So we spent 2 years creating the Chicken Shack. And this was a very fun moment for us, too, again, because if you go to a Shake Shack, the menu's not too big. We try to keep it focused. So adding that was a big deal to us, but we spent a lot of time. We wanted to be intentional about it, just like we created the burger, trying all the different cuts of meat, many iterations to get there. But again, this was important to our brand. This felt right for us, and it was the time to add something to the menu. To us, we consider that sacred real estate. So if it's going to go on there and it's going to get compared to the Shack burger, We're hoping it's going to have that same impact on people and create emotion, good or bad. Bad can be good too sometimes, but we wanted to keep growing and keep evolving. But again, who are we in the world of chicken? So a lot of conversations came up about that here. And then another big jump we made to Japan. Something about London and Japan I should quickly say is that these cities, 95% of the menu is coming from these cities. All that time in the beginning, 5 years of one location, living it, breathing it every day, trying to understand the rhyme to the reason, who we are, how the food gets executed, how we talk about the food, how the guests like it, came into this here. We found amazing dairy. I never knew that Japan has some of the most amazing dairy I've ever had. I don't know where the cows are here, but the dairy is fantastic. We made the cheese sauce locally. We made our custard locally. And these are big moves because we're very protective of our menu. We spent a year before we opened doing all this work. And one of my favorite stories, the last thing I'll talk about here before I go, is growing, knowing everything you do. We sat down to have a tasting of our chocolate custard. And we tried it, and we know those profiles so well. We know the texture. We know all those things because we've pretty much eaten it every day since it's open. We taste it, and we're like, it's delicious. They're like, great. Is it approved? I'm like, but it's not ours. What is this? And they're like, well, it has your ingredients. We have the recipe. I'm like, but what is this? This is not us. And they started to say, here's all the ingredients. And there's cocoa liquor in our custard. So they showed us the cocoa liquor. It was Godiva. We don't use that. We actually use cocoa liqueur. And they actually thought, lost in translation moment, that we used like actual alcohol style. And I'm like, that explains it. But again, it was delicious. It wasn't us. And we did finish that tub because it was fantastic. But that's what it all comes down to. If there's anything that we've learned over this time, I think that's helped us, again, is every step of the way, just examining what we're doing, just never being complacent. Even the small details, again, like salt actually made a huge difference for us. We stumbled a lot along those ways here, but at the end of the day, that's what helped us grow and actually helped us talk to people in a foreign country and say, what's important to us is this. You need to do this. This you have leeway on. We want to work with you guys. It's a dialogue, but we know from experience, this, and this is what's going to make this brand hopefully connect and hopefully work. But again, it's still lessons. So I know even at 550, the team is still saying, what can we do better? What's not working? And as soon as it starts to work, it starts to break, and then you got to re-examine it all over again. But just thoughtful re-examining of it, that's, I think, where we had a connection. So thank you guys very much.
Fascinating talk there from Mark, and amazing to see that story of the journey you've been on. First question, a little bit off topic, but I heard you say something and I was like, I wonder what that is. You said, do we Cheeto dust the burger?
Yeah, I'm sure you maybe have seen like that there's this trend like a few years back with the Cheetos brand. They were working with Taco Bell, and then people started to put Cheetos dust on a lot of stuff, mac and cheese, fried chicken. And we're always looking at that stuff. Like personally, how we felt about it was, if it's in the mainstream, we've already missed it. We get excited about stuff that is something that's maybe a little unexpected, but if we're seeing something, reacting to it, by the time it actually gets out, it's probably already past its point. But there's stuff like that happens. I mean, especially in the world of like fast casual, like people do some wild stuff with burgers that, again, is it something we want to be part of? Is it not? But we examine that stuff. Maybe there's something fun we could do. Again, a twist.
Speaking of wild stuff with burgers, one thing you didn't speak about there is some of the interesting collaborations you've done with burgers. And that was a big part of Shake Shack, wasn't it? Working with chefs, coming up with these one-off, unique, almost limited edition burgers, essentially. Talk to us a little bit about that. And
that was something that, again, was a bit unexpected. We were approaching our 10-year anniversary in 2014. And again, who are we? What is our brand? There's so many ways we could go, and so many stories we could tell. We're like, well, fine dining, that's who we are. That's where our mentality comes from. Half the people that work in the company come from that world. What can we do? Why don't we work with some fine dining chefs? Why don't we find some friends of ours that have helped us get to where we were and people that we admire? So we did a whole week of collaborations with chefs in New York City to celebrate. Daniel Hume, we actually did on the actual anniversary, and just him being him, they brought their champagne cart out from 11 Madison Park, put it in the dirt, and we're pouring champagne to people waiting in line. Again, just fun things like that. And then that same year, Massimo Bottura reached out. He was having a cookbook come out called Never Trust a Skinny Italian Chef.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm going to be in New York City. What if we create a burger together? I'm like, absolutely. And I think what's fun about this is you have these amazing chefs that have these restaurants where it's very hard to get into, they're very expensive, but if you can have them come and apply that same creativity, that same genius to something as simple as a hamburger, where we can actually maybe cook 1,000 of them, that's super fun. And he created a burger that just blew my mind. It was an homage to Emilia Romagna, using all ingredients there. But again, not our style, but our beef is unique. Like the way we cook it's unique. It's easy. It's like a blank canvas to bring in other chefs. And we've been very fortunate. We've done these collabs in London, in Japan. And again, for us, it's such an honor to be in these cities and know these people that we love to invite them in and do something cool.
And you spoke about this idea of the salt, which is fascinating. Like even the size of the salt is important. And you mentioned a couple of times of how to pick the right brands that we know can grow with us. And you guys really put Martin's potato rolls on the map. Like in France, I order them from Amazon. I wait weeks for them to arrive. I pay probably 10x what I should be paying for a potato roll, just to get a little bit of that nostalgia of Shake Shack when I make burgers. How do you grow and maintain a successful business while also making other brands grow with you? Has that been difficult? What have you learned there?
It has been a challenge, and I'll tell you 2 quick stories here. The Smoke Shack, again, we thought Shack Burger is king at Shake Shack. Anywhere you go, it always will be. It is what we're known for. Smoke Shack's number 2. We're very happy that happened because it's hard to live up to the Shack Burger. We know, but if people want bacon, they're going to get the cherry peppers or what make that burger unique to me. But what we didn't realize is where the cherry peppers were coming from, like in the Texas region and in Mexico, they're hard to get. The farmers are like, who are these guys in New York selling what? They're like, we don't have enough crop here. We don't have enough of these. We actually had to stop selling that burger for a short period one year because there weren't enough cherry peppers. And that's when we had to start reaching out. Again, a big supply chain team was because the menu is so important to us. There's a lot of moving parts that we had to reach out to them and say, okay, here's projections. We can't believe we have to give you guys projections, but here's what we think we're going to sell. And they're like, sweet, that's all we needed. We can plant crops for next year, so this will not happen again. But we had to stop selling that burger. And the other thing is, when it comes to the beer and wine, in the very beginning, we were working with Frog's Leap out in California, and they were making a Shack Red and a Shack White, and we were charging very little for it. We wanted to hook up people that were in the wine community that were actually going to get a bottle of wine. And that was an amazing moment. It was super delicious wines that drank a lot more expensive than we were paying for. But the owner of the company reached out to us one day, and this is maybe about 6 years ago. He goes, I'm done. I want out, guys. How do I get the hell out of this here? And we're like, what's going on? He goes, I got into business to have fun. I love drinking wine. He goes, I am running now a 24/7 operation trying to keep up with you guys. I don't want this anymore. I'm stressed. And we're like, that is awesome. We totally respect that. And like, yeah, tell us if you can't grow with us. It took us a year after that to find someone else. Again, spending a lot of time with people, understanding who they are, understanding their craft, understanding who they are as people too, before we made the change. But again, there are people that want to come along for the ride and do what they can. And then there's some that are like, it's too much work, guys. Best of luck with the little burger thing. I'm going to do something else.
And what stops you doing what lots of large chains would do, which is to say, at some point, it's more profitable for us to make our own potato rolls or make our own chili pepper or make our own sauce and not work with the suppliers we're working with. Why don't you do that? What stops you doing that?
Because I think, again, like knowing who we are and defining who we are as a company, it's kind of like we know our lane. We do burgers, fries, and milkshakes. Like the amount of time we spent trying to perfect that and grow this brand, there are people out there much smarter than us, much more have the better ability, and it's their business to craft wine or, again, to grow these and pickle these peppers. And even something like the very first Chicago dog I showed you, that vendor Rick's Picks, guy makes the best pickles I've ever had. Like it'd take me years.
Is he still with you? Is he still working with the company? Or?
We've changed the menu a bit, but yes, we do have him in one location, the original one. It's where we still serve the Chicago dog. During the pandemic, we took it off. It is a very labor-intensive item, and we didn't sell too much. Again, everyone thinks of us as a burger place, so we're like, well, maybe we can ease up on the team a little bit here, but it is part of the history, so we want to make sure that it still has a life somewhere. But yeah, there's times where like it's a bit of a challenge.
What's been the most difficult hurdle on this journey of growth that you've had at Shake Shack for you?
I think for us, our culture is It's trying to find the yes. If you go to any of the restaurants, the fine dining restaurants, I remember one time we were cooking, and the waiter came in and goes, I have these two guests. They want to do a tasting menu, but they don't want any color. Every single ingredient has to be white. I'm like, what? Who does that? We did it though. We said yes. I don't remember what we served. There's a lot of like fish and mashed potatoes. White asparagus might have been in season that year, but I was like, what? We said yes? Who the hell are these people? The reality is that's who we are. We're always trying to find the yes. But when it comes to growing, not just international, I think it's very true this happens. But if you find a partner and you're opening maybe in a different city, different part of the world, they're going to ask questions. And they may not understand the culture. They may not understand like how we're trying to be on the person's side. Say, I hear what you're saying. You want to add Teletubbies to dance around the line, entertain the kids. Okay, it's interesting. That's not our brand. So, but we love how you're thinking, creativity, getting people excited. So some people would go, oh, so that's a yes then. You didn't say no. So we realized we actually had to be a little tougher than we were, what our culture was. We could still be on their side. But if someone asks that question now, it's like, no, here's why. But we realized, again, our culture had to change. And it's still very much intact for what it originally was when Danny wrote his book, Setting the Table. But that maybe will not work for a restaurant group at this size now. So we have to be more direct.
And we're going to open it up to some questions from the crowd in a minute. I think my last question and what I'd like to know is, what can we expect from Shake Shack in the next 10 years? I'm sure now you're planning, you've got new innovations planned. Can you give us a little bit of an insight on what maybe we can expect from Shake Shack going forward?
Well, so I'm no longer with them anymore. And I think what's really unique is this is an interesting part of the time because 500 plus locations, our current CEO just has said he was stepping down. So there's a new person coming in. And again, I think what's going to happen here is the brand has to continue to change and evolve. And it'll be really interesting to see. I'll be there as a fan on the sidelines watching. And that's the thing. If this restaurant gets to, say, 600, there'll be some changes. If it gets to 1,000, there'll be some changes. But it has to keep evolving. And everything we think we know, it was funny. Like we always say, like the Shack Burger is not sacred. If there's something we can do better, even though this is literally what built the brand for 20 years, we would still look at that every day and say, is there something that we can do better about that? Maybe where the beef's coming from, should we start using regenerative beef? Like, what can we do? So there's everything on the table. Everything's always being examined to make sure it is what it can be. So I'll be curious. I know, again, it will have to change. It'll have to evolve. So I'll be excited to see that myself.
What can we expect from you then? Are you working on new projects? Are you developing anything new? I mean, where have you gone in your career?
I started to do consulting. And after 16 years here, there's been a lot that I've learned that I just don't think I can forget easily. And we learned a lot of lessons the hard way. I mean, like the fries were one thing that actually I kind of downplayed how stressful that moment was for us.
I'm glad you went back to the crinkle cut because
yeah,
nostalgia is the best flavor in the world. And
it is. And again, like the food has to have a connection to people. There has to be a rhyme to the reason. And even I think the best connections are something super, super personal. Like again, that burger, I had a personal connection with it, and I didn't know if it would have mass appeal. That wasn't the question we were asking. We were not thinking about that level. There's something we've always said in the company, the bigger we get, the smaller we have to act. We still would go and have tastings and forget we had all these other restaurants. We'd be sitting there dissecting that burger saying, is this interesting? Is this delicious? Is this the best we can do? Like how to scale, it's a whole nother thing, but I think that's something I was very proud of with the company was that we still, like in a vacuum, would say, is this exciting? Is this unique? Can this scale? And I tell people that all the time, as in the consulting world. It's like a lot of people like to grow. They have these amazing ideas, but I always say, go slow. Answer all those questions. Is this the best you can be right now? Because if you get to 3 locations and you're a little shaky, it's only going to get worse. It's going to probably crumble. You have to put that strong base in there, but only know that because we've broken the base many a times and did some really ridiculous things.
And let's play to the home crowd advantage a little bit. Why was Miami the right location for that first step out of New York?
Again, like it wasn't anything we planned. They had come to us. We probably would have slowly grown in New York. Same thing internationally. Most brands, you grow throughout the States and then you start to think about international, but these were great opportunities that came to us that we had some very serious conversations, and there were other opportunities that we never took. But again, we examined them. Is this the right time? Do we have the bandwidth? Are these the right people? Miami came about, And we felt there was a strong connection between New York and Miami. A lot of people come down here in the winter from New York, so we thought this is something great. But also the culinary scene here is so amazing. The food culture here, it's such a cool place. We're like, this is gonna be fun. This will be a lot of fun. And a lot of us in the company had a connection with Miami. My parents live not too far from here, that this was exciting. So again, it was a bit of a risky move. And to be honest, that location didn't do gangbusters. It took us a while to build the business. We've never had to do that before. In New York, people knew the name, people would come. That was an opportunity to learn to grow in terms of like, how do we talk about ourselves? Do we advertise? We've never advertised before, but it wasn't working. We had to then again, dig in, just like we did that initial location, say, what are we gonna do? Do we go and scoop custard at the local like high school or something? Like, how do we connect? But we kept coming back to, we're about connecting with the neighborhoods. We're about hospitality. We're giving a little extra than people expect. How can we like do it in ways we never thought?
And let's open it up to the crowd now and see if there's any questions out there. I see a hand here at the back.
As Shake Shack grew and you were looking at scaling, what were some of the key leadership roles that you put into place that helped enable that successful growth?
That's an excellent question. When we opened the second location and then we had the Mets knocking on the door, we realized we needed to become like a little more self-sufficient. So all the people that were managers, they had to grow. So I became the culinary director at the time. My boss, who hired me, became like the operations director. So we had to make sure the food was good. We knew at the end of the day, food and culture are the two biggest drivers of our brand. So that's where we put all the time and energy into. But then there was the story part. So the third hire for quote unquote Shake Shack Enterprises in those early days was a marketing person. And those were kind of the structural things we need in place. We needed to tell the story. We need to make sure it was living up to the story. And we needed to make sure it was always going to be delicious. And then supply chain is, again, like we can create anything, but can we actually serve it? Can we actually source it? So before we would ever go into a new city or a new market, our supply chain lead would go into those cities beforehand and say, okay, what is here? Like, who's going to carry our food? Who's going to deliver? What does that look like? And there were cities we wanted to go to that we didn't go right away because they weren't quite ready. They did not have the level that we needed to actually go in there and do it right. Internationally is a big example of that too. We're like, we would love to be in these cities, but it's just not the right time. So let's go and do it somewhere else. But I would say it was like the culinary, it was the operations, marketing, and supply chain once we really started to grow.
And one more question to this chap here, and then we're going to move on to the next speakers.
I wanted to ask if you guys are applying the same type of innovation that you apply in the fast food inside of your company, like with your employees, like what Shake Shack and the hospitality group as a whole does different of other brands or restaurants.
That is super important. As everyone in the room knows, it's the people that are actually behind the stoves that are serving that's so important to us. And in the early days, we wanted to make a commitment to make sure that we were paying above everyone else. We wanted to attract the best people. But the other thing that we thought was really exciting about it was giving people a chance to grow. In the original Shake Shack in Madison Park, we still have people that were there that trained me back in the early days. And then the other one, Upper West Side, there are still team members. I go in there, I see, oh, you guys are still here. This is awesome. We try to create a vibe in there where people feel relaxed, they can be themselves, they can feel heard. It's the biggest part of the company. Again, it comes back to the culture. And to the point where we opened in Dubai, I lived out there for 2 months. We knew at that point, that was location number 7, that we could train the food. We had it down to the point where we can take a person that's never cooked before and confidently have them cooking burgers maybe after a day or two, but it's the culture, the hospitality that took us a lot longer to inoculate into that city. And that was something we wanted to do. And it's really exciting because like when I go to these countries and I see the people, I forget sometimes that I'll be walking and I'll hear someone say something that's very much part of our company culture about like just like kitchen speak or something like that. Or like, did you take care of that guest? They seem a little upset. Okay, just give them free fries. We're all about that. We train that in the United States. Like if a guest is not loving it, do whatever you want. We will never be mad at you for going above and beyond for hospitality. We would say, try to put us out of business with generosity. Go crazy. And then to go to a different part of the world and then hear someone think about that and say that, that's when we know the brand is doing what it needs to be. But we know if the people are happy, it's so key that hopefully it's going to create the culture within each restaurant. And there's also a lot of people that, thank God, they love that culture. They've stayed with us. They've grown. We have area directors that started off as just line cooks. But that's a big part of the brand, is telling that story internally of where you can go. One other thing I'll say that we do that I thought was really amazing, giving people raises, all of that sort of stuff. We did not have a system to do that. We would say, well, they've been here for this amount of years, they can do this. Let's give them X amount. We had to start to put like an actual structure in place to that. We had to be more intentional. So what we did was we hire people, everyone at the same rate. But we have something we call the train tracker, where if you want a raise, here's how to do it. Here's a clear path. Here is how you can get a raise. You're gonna get certified on a station. You're gonna be the master of cooking burgers. Here's the information you need. It's on you. We wanna reward you, because if you're great for us, that's great for the whole brand. But it's on you. And that, again, has created the culture in time where people are saying, I can grow in this company. Here's a clear path. If I want to become a manager, I actually can do it. Here's what I need to do. It's all in my hands. And we think that's a better way of doing it. And again, it creates inside the actual teams, people helping each other out. Hey man, you've been here for a while. Why don't you try to get certified on a station? You think I can? I'll show you how to do it. And I think that's been super important to us, is like when people come in, it's trying to make it feel fun. That's the most important thing for us.
Mark, thanks so much for coming down. Thanks for this great presentation. I can't wait to taste whatever amazing culinary creation you come up with next. Please, let's give a round of applause to Mark.
Thank you, everybody.